So we're live again.
Yeah.
This is the Greg and Donny News Show. I'm Greg Penglis, and this is Donny West, and we talk about the news from my perspective, which is conservative,
and from my perspective, which is correct.
I always think he's going to say, like, what I expect him to say. It never quite works out that way. We want to do a special report on Labor Day, and because nobody else will, and so we wanted to talk about that. Last year, when I was at WPY, I spent an entire hour talking about labor history, and unfortunately that show, although it was recorded, I don't have that particular one in my possession. So I dug up the notes, rather voluminous. And I use notes. Donny has his phone. Okay, so this is the difference between the generations. So although he's saving paper and trees, I'm still old school, so I have my notes here. So I dug up my notes from some of the things that happened on that particular hour, and one of the things that is sadly lacking in education today is an education of labor history. And we're coming to you from the gazebo here in Milton, on the banks of the Blackwater River, which is right behind us. We have boats going by. It's a beautiful day here. And it's actually cooling enough where we can do this and not pass out, but it's pretty cool. But labor history gets missed. And I was just going over some of the articles that Donny wrote briefly here, but a lot of things that people don't realize. Your weekend, your 8-hour day, your lunch, your sick leave, the fact that you have a contract at all, the fact that you have rules at work, all of these things came from unions, and people died. Many people died for those rights. People don't realize that companies will let our personal watercraft cruise by here. Well, on the river, so what happens? I love these things myself. I really want to do it. So take a little breaks when this happens. But people died. There were armies that were hired by corporations. Can you imagine, today a company hiring a bunch of soldiers to shoot their own workers because they're not making enough profit, they're not working hard enough, they're not working for $2 a day, 16 hours for those $2.
I don't remember which one, but there were a couple presidents who sent the troops in to shoot striking workers.
Yeah, well, actually, I think Truman sent the troops in for the steel strike.
Oh, yeah.
And was it Teddy Roosevelt?
No, Teddy was very pro-unions.
But it was it McKinley? It was about that time. I know there were presidents.
Who was the guy before McKinley?
I don't know. This is why it's a live and unrehearsed show, because we go into history that we don't always know about. But yeah, presidents have sent the troops in. But that's not the problem. The problem is that a lot of soldiers, once they came back from various wars, like the Spanish-American War, 1890, they're trained as soldiers. They're not trained as carpenters, bakers, beginning auto mechanics, as the cars slowly coming in the early 1900s, things like that. So a lot of them became mercenaries for companies. They worked for organizations like the Pinkerton. They joined groups, and they basically were soldiers against Americans. In fact, there was a fascinating thing I saw recently, a report on the bonus wars. I don't know if you ever heard about this. It's a little phase of our history. You may not.
I've read into it, but I don't know much.
Okay, so the World War I soldiers were promised a bonus for fighting in the war.
Oh, yeah.
And the government welched on the deal. I use that word particularly because we talked about monkey in the previous video. Well, do you know the word welshing comes from the Welsh, because Welsh were considered subhumans by the British. Okay, so if you welsh on a deal, that means you're a subhuman, person from Wales. All right. So this is really, in fact, I post that too. Or gyps. You ever hear about that one? That's from gypsies. Yeah. So all these things are in our language, and people don't realize it. So, but those aren't triggers like monkey is when I wrote back in the previous thing. But there's so much in our labor history that people don't realize. And so back to the bonus wars, what happened was the soldiers, they wanted their bonus. They marched on Washington, and they were fired upon by other soldiers. The army was, who called them out? Who was that? MacArthur.
I don't want to say it was my heroes, but it was Patton and MacArthur.
It was Patton and MacArthur.
Eisenhower was the one who tried to stop them.
Fired upon American veterans in the bonus, they were called wars. They lived in a village in Washington. They set up a little shantytown kind of thing.
That was your boy Herbert Hoover.
It's not my boy.
FDR took care of him.
Oh, I'm not a Greg Herbert fan. In fact, very few presidents I'm in favor of. I think Calvin Coolidge, John Kennedy, Trump, those would be my big three. And then Lincoln, Jefferson, Madison would be like my other big three. And other than that, they're just presidents. They're just wasn't supposed to be that big in office. All right, so that's very. I didn't know about Pat, but I knew about MacArthur. So Pat and MacArthur, turns out, they're the ones who actually organized the soldiers to fire on the veterans. All right. That's disgusting in itself.
Yes.
Now, what I find interesting is that Eisenhower, tell me about that, because I don't know about that part of the history.
Essentially, it was interesting because there were two different philosophies in play here.
Okay.
Clinton and MacArthur, although they themselves more or less agreed with the guys and absolutely hated what they had to do, I consider these guys heroes, so I gotta defend them.
Okay.
They thought, okay, these are our orders. We absolutely cannot.
Oh, that's the Nuremberg defense. That isn't no
Right.
war.
This was before Nuremberg.
They were just following orders. Yeah,
This
that's what the German officers used to say from
Yeah.
the SS camp, from the death camp. Oh, we were just following orders.
Right.
That's no excuse.
This was before Nuremberg, though, when it wasn't established that was no excuse. So we had the two philosophies.
Oh,
There was them, the old school philosophy.
Okay.
And we had Eisenhower, who was like, okay, this is wrong, guys. We can't do this.
Where was Eisenhower at that point? Do you know his rank? He wasn't a general yet, or was he?
He was.
This is like the early 1930s or late 1920s.
Making his way up there. He wasn't quite there yet, but he was still high up enough that he could kind of make a difference, but not really.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, so that's one of our histories that a lot of people don't know about. All right, let me tell you some more here. So I happened to I wrote a lot of notes for my Labor Day show last year on WBY. And one of the things I found was the 10 greatest labor strikes in American history. And so today, this is going to be a little longer video because I want to put this all in one just so that you have it. Listen to it in parts, listen to it in pieces, share it with your family, share it with your friends. This is an education you're not going to get in the public schools, even though they're unionized, the teachers are unionized. We're going to get into government unions in a little bit. But let's talk about just a little bit here. The Great Southwest Railroad Strike. This involved 200,000 strikers. It ran from March through September of 1886 in Arkansas, Illinois, Kansas, Missouri, and Texas. And they say by the end of the 1800s, the American Railroad was expanding quickly. 1886, the Knights of Labor struck against the Union Pacific and Missouri Pacific Railroads owned by J. Gould. Now they call him a robber baron. This is obviously a pro-union report, so I'll try and take out simple language. But they said that hundreds of thousands of workers across 5 states refused to work, citing unsafe conditions and unfair hours and pay. The strike suffered from a lack of commitment from other railroad unions. So there was no solidarity between the unions, which is interesting, probably because those unions were told by their company if they went on strike, they might be shot too. Wouldn't surprise me. Anyway, the successful hiring of non-union workers by Gould, what we call scabs, all right, violence and scare tactics, eventually the strike failed, and the Knights of Labor disbanded soon afterwards. So there's a strike that ran from March through September of 1886. And yeah, now that's not one of the worst ones, but it's interesting. Railroads. Now look at the things they were striking for. Unsafe conditions, unfair hours and pay. It's not that different than today. You know, back when we were in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, the railroads, the mines especially, the factories, the bakeries, which we're going to talk about a little bit, were horrible places to work. There were no rules. There was no OSHA. There were no worker standards. There was no contract. You couldn't say, I'm not going to do that. You'd be fired and be replaced by somebody else. Right? You know, especially during the Depression, which was a horrible time for unions because there's so many people who needed a job. And so this is why economists came up with this bizarre theory that 4% unemployment is really 0% unemployment. It's BS. It's a lie. Okay. I don't really sound very conservative right now, do I? Okay. But you know, I was a Teamster. I understand labor history. I know where I came from. There's a reason I feel the way I do, and the reason I have a great respect for what the labor folks did and for what unions did, and I still do. I think unions get a really bad rap, and I think we'd have a lot better. I would rather see unions negotiate private contracts for higher wages than a government set minimum wage, even if that union wage were higher. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Because I'd rather have the free association of the people of the union being represented, the members being represented by a union, because the management bargains collectively. I made this point it's in my notes a little bit later on. Management bargains collectively. You can't go to one manager and say, well, how much do you give me if I do this job? And they give you a certain fee. It's okay, well, that's not bad. Let me go check with your other managers. You know, and bargain with all of them and see who's going to give you the best deal. It doesn't work that way. The manager's kind of, you know, if one manager is in charge of a department, they determine how much you get paid for that department. All right. So management bargains collectively, and management, you know, backs each other up. They're not all independent. So the problem we have with workers is the workers bargain independently, where they had no power. Management bargained collectively, where they had all the power, and the workers suffered. That's why I'm pro-union.
All right.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Want to do the strike? All right. 250,000 strikers. The Pullman strike, famous strike, May 11th to mid-July 1894. Facing 12-hour workdays and cut wages resulting from the depressed economy, factory workers of the Pullman Palace Car Company walked out. Workers were soon joined by members of the American Railway Union, who refused to work or run any trains, which included Pullman-owned cars. Soon, 250,000, that's 250,000 industry workers joined the strike, effectively shutting down train traffic west of Chicago. Now, Chicago was the hub. Chicago and St. Louis were the gateway of the railroads to the west. So you shut down Chicago, you're effectively shutting down half the nation's trains.
Right.
You know, I'm sure they shut down the ones coming from the west as well, so there you go. Now here's the president. The strike ended when President Grover Cleveland, this is the one you want, right? President Grover Cleveland sent federal troops to Chicago on July 6, 1894. However, widespread sympathy for the workers' cause promoted pro-union sentiment across many areas of the country. Now what's interesting is nobody's been killed in these strikes in the 1800s. So they were actually settled fairly amicably, even though the working conditions were horrible. So if you want to know again why you have better working conditions, this is why. All right. The really bad strikes are coming up.
If you want a warm and toasty ending, stop listening now. If you want to know what really happened,
what do you mean? What are you talking about?
If they want to just have this nice, warm and toasty feeling and think nothing bad has ever happened in America,
nothing but let's put happy faces.
Yeah.
Yes. La 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 la. There's no union history. Yeah. All right. Let's give you the truth, which we do as soon as our vote goes by. All right. So I got that one covered. The Great Anthracite Coal Strike. 147,000 workers from May to October 1902, Eastern Pennsylvania. At the turn of the last century, the United Mine Workers of America began a strike, which threatened to create an energy crisis. Isn't it interesting? Because we were dependent on coal. All right. Early 1900s depended on coal. The Industrial Revolution ramping up, everything ran on coal.
Yeah.
Everything was heated by coal. Every industry was run on coal and steam power. Every transportation, every train was run on steam power from coal. So coal was it. Anthracite, I think, is one of our better forms of coal. Anyway, so United Mine Workers of America began a strike which threatened to create the energy crisis, seeking, as always, better wages and conditions. So the UMWA, United Mine Workers of America, struck an area that contained the majority of the nation's supply of anthracite coal. As the winter of 1903 approached, President Theodore Roosevelt, the one you said was very pro-union, okay, became concerned that a heating crisis could develop and attempted to intervene unsuccessfully. So he didn't send in the troops. Industrialist J.P. Morgan, we heard of him before, right? Okay, believed the strike could threaten his business and made a deal with the union. So there you go. Initial demands for a 20% wage increase, but they ended up with a 10% increase, which probably wasn't a whole lot considering how much they paid. All right, I want to get to one of the worst ones here, where there's one where the workers were actually, I'm not trying to be unnecessarily gruesome here, but let me see if I can find that one in particular. But if you have a general comment for a minute on just labor in general, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I just want to say, our unions are something that need to be protected. I mean, they're under attack right now in a way that we haven't seen in a while, and as you can hear so far, and we'll continue to hear, I mean, our country is as good as it is because of unions. Unions built our nation. Unions gave us everything we enjoy, and it's like we're not even thankful for it. It's like we're just willing to sit back and let whatever happens happen.
I don't see what I'm looking for here, so I'm going to push on. But yeah, and as a conservative, conservatives want to conserve. Now, if the definition of conservative is wanting to conserve, you probably want to conserve those 2-hour work days. Okay, this is where I disagree with conservatives. All right, I don't like the definition. This is where I'm much more of an independent constitutionalist and a person that believes in liberty. And so liberty, part of liberty is the accumulation of private property. Necessary for private property is the money to do it. If you're paid so badly that you can't even pay your bills, you know, let's talk about company towns for a minute here. You know, because we talk about the worst thing in American history was slavery, and in some, obviously, yes, but there were certainly things that were equally as bad, if not in many cases worse. Company towns, where you moved into this town, you lived in company housing, you shopped at the company store. They didn't pay you money; they paid you scrip.
Right.
And you took that to the store, but they never paid you enough to live on it. So your debt got bigger and bigger and bigger. So the longer you worked for the company, the more in debt you became to that company. So you could never leave. And if you did, you owed them money. And they would chase you for that money for the rest of your life. And so that to me is just a horrible situation. I'm going to skip the rest of the strikes here. I want to get into some of the. You want to do right to work?
Let's do right to work. I'm waiting for it.
Well, we can always advance. You don't have to. You know, if I'm rambling on too long, just say this is going to be a longer video.
No, I was having fun with that.
Okay, good.
I'm ready for right to work.
So tell me about right to work.
Well, big shocker, I know. I'm not for right to work.
What is right to work?
Essentially, to my understanding, of course, it's one of those things where it's more complicated than it sounds, but it's essentially, it's almost a ban on unions. It's almost saying that you have the right to work in this place, and therefore you can't unionize. It's just not allowed whatsoever. And if you don't like it, you can leave and go somewhere else.
You know, they want to actually put this in the Constitution, the right to work. I'm here to tell you, there is no right to work. Okay? That is a very bad misnomer. It's misleading, it's disingenuous, and I know it's pushed by the folks that want that, but the idea that work is a right. No, it's not. Okay, what is a right is what the government would ordinarily, under dictatorial nations, prevent you from doing. Free speech, arming yourself, due process, because they like to make up their own procedures. Those are rights. Freedom of religion, that's a right. Work is not a right. Neither is healthcare, neither is anything you get. Work is something you need to accumulate private property. Accumulating private property is a right because it requires individual action. It's something that you can do, and the government has no right to infringe on your right to do that. But to say that the government can create this right to work and then regulate the conditions whereby you can be prevented from joining a union can be destroyed, or all these other things, that's not a good way to say it. I'll get to what I'm saying in a minute. But the fact that the government has no power, governments have powers, people have rights. So the government should have no power to dictate really in this area. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. So, and the basic problem, what it comes down to, is that there are workers that have decided in a company that they want to have representation from a union. They want to bargain collectively, just as management bargains collectively. So basically what they want is equal. This is why I'm a big fan of private unions. They want equal power with management. So a collective union bargains with a collective management. That is an equal position, as opposed to an individual worker bargaining with a collective management. That is not an equal position. Yet that was what was enforced in this country by the Supreme Court for decades and caused a lot of our labor problems and caused a lot of people to be killed. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
So here's my, so you seem to have not really the most positive view of right to work. So here's my cheap shot of the episode.
You're entitled to one.
Yep. So Trump, Gates, DeSantis, Jordan, all those guys you like are all essentially for expanding right to work throughout the nation. So are you with them on that?
No, I'm not.
All right.
No.
So you're willing to say they're wrong on this?
They are. And I'll tell you why. Because if you believe in individual liberty, you believe in the right of people to freely associate. Free association includes a union. If you are in a company, if you're working in a company that's established a union contract, you should have the right to say, well, the right or the power to say what happens with that company for new people coming in. If the contract is there, people are getting a benefit from that contract. So the whole reason for getting a union contract, you're going to make more money than without one. All right, sometimes substantially more. I worked for a delivery company for a time as a Teamster, and the Teamster contract compared to the non-union contract was night and day. And here's what people don't realize. I'm going to digress for a second. Union workers actually make companies more profitable. All right? Union workers in this Teamster company were long-term. They knew their job. They planned on making it a career. They had good customer relations. The company knew the work rules. Everybody knew where they stood. Everybody knew what was going on. Okay? So there was no constant turnover. In the non-union companies, branches of this same company, there was constant turnover, constant training. The service was terrible. They made money with low wages, whereas the union barns, if you will, made money because they had a better quality of service.
No one likes a scab.
No one will scab. Someone comes in now. So the thing is, if you are in a union company, it makes perfect sense to me. This is where being the independent that I am, it makes perfect sense to me that you should be, if you go into a company, you go with the understanding of how that company already operates. difference. Companies already have procedures, okay? Well, what's the difference between a company already having procedures and unions already having a contract that you have to join the union in order to work for that company? Okay? It doesn't make any sense to me to have a difference. To have it's okay to have company policies, but not have company contracts. We may not be able to do this as long as I want. So I'm going to put my camera thing, the holder behind it. Let's try this. Does that make sense, though?
Yeah.
So that's my right to work. Okay? You can blow it all around here, but I don't care. We do have a studio in the works. It's going to be inside soon. And I think you'll be able to hear us a little more clearly, but it won't be as much fun as we're having out here. So, but the argument for right to work is that wages are lower, costs are lower, prices of goods are lower. And I'm saying it's like the old argument, well, if we don't have illegal aliens picking our lettuce, it's going to be too expensive and people won't buy it. I don't buy that argument either. If it's more expensive because you use American workers, then it's more expensive. That's just the way it goes. You got to find another way to compete. You can't do something illegal, as far as I'm concerned, to bring in illegal workers just to lower prices. In the same way, if a company is unionized and the company has decided that you have to join the union in order to work at that company, that makes perfect sense to me. If you don't want to do it, don't join that company.
Sounds like a perfect segue into NAFTA, isn't it?
Go for NAFTA. Tell me about it.
Well, NAFTA's been in the news lately. Can't get any straight answer on what exactly they're trying to do, but Trump...
Well, it's not NAFTA anymore. It's a new agreement.
NAFTA.
Yeah. Well, no, it's split because you've got the United States and Mexico have an agreement. This is what Trump wanted to do. And the United States and Canada have a separate agreement. So there's no North American free trade zone. But I like that because I don't want to homogenize this country. There are other problems with... There was a time in our history where we had to harmonize the laws and make all our laws the same and open the borders. That's what NAFTA was really about. Open borders, harmonized laws, and even at a marrow, the currency. Remember they wanted to have one currency, that Canada, like the euro. Okay, so there's a lot more going on with NAFTA. And that's part of the reason Trump's getting rid of it, although you don't hear about that necessarily. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very against NAFTA. That's one of those big things I'll criticize Bill Clinton on.
Why? What was the problem?
First of all, there's the fact that that's one of the things that almost single-handedly lost us 2016. So I got a personal thing there.
That's
and
interesting.
Also took a lot of American jobs. It hurt us.
Yeah.
There are jobs here. There aren't opportunities like there used to be. And during the election, he would always, one of the things I'll give Trump, he would always make valid points about this, and Hillary would just sit there with that smug look on her face during the debates.
Well, you got to remember, she thought she was going to win.
Yeah, just act like anyone who had any sort of concerns about this was the biggest idiot.
Yeah.
Wouldn't say what she would do about it, and that's one of the places we lost.
Yeah, it's like she was her own worst enemy. It was really too bad. But as far as trade deals go, you have to, and I don't think Hillary did. See, Hillary I see as a globalist. Okay, I see Obama and the Clintons and the Bushes as globalists. Their idea is how does the United States fit into the world because they want to be the elite. They think of themselves as like the leaders. They're sort of in charge of the whole world here.
I don't necessarily mind that.
I do. Because I don't want to be a UN place because our rights are so far superior to any other country's rights. And you don't want to lose that. So, if we harmonize with the world, it's not that the rest of the world is going to get our rights, it's that we're going to get the rest of the world's restrictions. That's the problem. That's the problem as I see it. And so you've got the whole globalist idea of trade is that we become this one big cooperative market and the government regulates it. And that's the problem I have. Whereas Trump, what he's doing, he's making deals that are actually business-to-business deals as opposed to government-to-government. It's a very big difference. I don't know the details, I haven't seen it yet. But I think it's very, very curious what's going on as to how that works out. But
I'm going to wait to really make my mind up on it. I don't know whether I'm for or against it. Okay. This might be one of the things I'm with him on. We'll have to see.
Yeah. I got one more topic I want to cover as far as our union, our Labor Day show this year. And that is the Supreme Court.
All right.
And I've talked about this before. The Supreme Court has done more damage to this country than you could possibly imagine because it's not reported. And Kavanaugh's hearings start Tuesday. So I'm going to be watching those very closely because I don't trust him. I think he's a swamp candidate. I think he's going to be the next Kennedy. I think he's going to be a liberal, conservative swing vote. I think he's the wrong person for the job.
Cut out the middleman, bring back Merrick Garland.
Well, he's definitely the wrong person for the job. So let me talk. So my problem with the Supreme Court has always been that they usurped a power they were not entitled to, and they were let to get away with it. And it's affected the left as much as the right. Okay, and this is where we sort of talked about this before the show started, where I got into, I think, the reason the left made such a point of putting judges on the courts is to use the courts the way the conservatives did earlier on. I didn't think of this until just a little while ago. So follow me through on this, and see if it makes sense to you. All right. So the concept was liberty of contract. And this was the idea that we talked about earlier in the show, where an individual worker bargained equally with a huge corporation, right? And they were both equal partners, and they both were at liberty to come to an equal agreement. It was total nonsense, of course, because with unemployment and the problems that there were, and people desperate for jobs, they basically accepted whatever the companies offered. All right. And the conditions were horrible. Then when the conditions got so bad, they went on strike, and that's how the unions formed, and the companies, tried to break the strikes and do everything else. And that's how we got the National Labor Relations Board and some kind of fair labor practices. And this is why a lot of the rules that you have today for certifying unions are the way they are. But back in the early 1900s, the Supreme Court, and the case that started us off, you can look this up, it's Lochner versus New York. Right? Lochner was a baker. And you think, we got this wonderful Milton Bakery right here. It's great.
Love it.
Oh, they're wonderful. So you got to go to the Milton Bakery. So there's my shameless plug, all right? But they've got a nice little bakery in back, and it's friendly and it's fun. They have a great time, and it's wonderful. That's not what we're talking about with Lochner. The old bakeries at the turn of the century were horrible. There was flour dust everywhere. It got in your lungs. People would, you have black lung disease in the mines. Well, they had flour lung disease as well. Okay, and so these bakeries were hot. The ovens were running 24 hours a day. They were completely unsafe. People were constantly being burned. They'd work 12-hour shifts. They'd work 60 to 80 hours a week. They were exhausted. Stuff happened because they were exhausted. These were horrible working conditions. So in that picture, now that you have that in your mind of what it's like to work in a turn-of-the-century factory bakery, all right? Imagine the Supreme Court coming along and saying, Mr. or Ms. Baker, you're at liberty to bargain with your employer for the wage that you want, that you agree to. And if you agree to work in those horrible conditions, well, that's not for us to say anything about. That's where I fought the Supreme Court. Wow. Okay, so liberty of contract, you get all these notes, this is kind of fun. Now here's the other thing too. In doing so, the rationalization, this is why the Supreme Court should never be allowed to interpret. Because what they interpreted due process to be was a new term which they called substantive due process. Okay, so due process wasn't enough, they then had a higher standard which they invented. It's like the lemon law for crosses and things like that. All right, so the court came in and said that unions couldn't form, that they were basically said they were illegal because they violate liberty of contract. They violate due process of the 14th Amendment, that it was illegal to unionize because it violated this imaginary concept of liberty of contract. And that's why so many workers were killed, because they couldn't unionize, because companies took advantage of that to hire workers. They said, well, look, Supreme Court said you can't unionize. We're just enforcing our company rights and policies. And that's what happened. And this set us back 50 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was not familiar with that.
Of course not.
I don't think a lot of people are.
No, that's what I'm telling you.
Yeah.
That's what I'm telling you now. I took labor history. I looked this stuff up. But I'll give you my notes. I think you'll find this fascinating over this week, and there are a lot more cases like that. That's where it came from. And so I want to just read you just a couple little pieces here before we shut this one down. It says, with this 1905 decision in the case of Lochner versus New York, the Supreme Court embarked upon one of the most controversial courses in its history. Over the next 3 decades, so that'll be 1905 to 1935. Now you notice the left took over the court with Roosevelt in the 40s. I think, this is my proposal, is that the left did its best to influence the court because of what happened with the earlier court preventing the unions from forming under this liberty of contract nonsense. And now it's swung back the other way. Trump is now in a position to appoint so many court members to make it conservative courts. They're both wrong. The court shouldn't be liberal or conservative. They should resolve cases from the parties that are involved, and they should not extend beyond those cases. All right.
Makes sense.
Yes, I mean, you know, you think it's great. Oh yeah, lots of liberal judges, that'll be wonderful. Well, if you're going to have liberal judges, one day you're going to have conservative judges. And the conservatives are now thinking, oh look, we're getting all these conservatives on the court. Well, that's going to change too.
Not going to last.
So now this is permanent. All right. Over the next 3 decades, the court would strike down numerous attempts by state governments to improve working conditions or protect consumers, all under the guise of a liberty found in the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, the liberty of contract. Okay? The term substantive due process is often used to describe the approach first used in Lochner, the finding of liberties not explicitly protected by the text of the Constitution to impliedly, I didn't even know that was a word, impliedly protected by the Liberty Clause of the 14th Amendment. In the 1960s, long after the court repudiated its Lochner line of cases, substantive due process became the basis for protecting personal rights such as the right of privacy, the right to maintain intimate family relationships, and basically led directly to Roe versus Wade. And now you know how that came about. Or as Paula Harvey would say, and now you know the rest of the story. But isn't that interesting?
It is.
So you can see how the Supreme Court, in first making up this bogus right, liberty of contract, which does not exist, led directly to the court saying, well, okay, well, if these conservative jerks can subvert unions, then we can say that there's a right to privacy, and we can make up that right, even though that's not in the Constitution either, and use this as a precedent. And that's why precedent's so dangerous. See how this is all going? All right. So anyway, I just want to read one more thing. I think I'm done.
Right.
The greatest flaw in the liberty of contract doctrine was that it assumed equal bargaining power for all parties, whereas employers unquestionably predominated. For employers, liberty of contract was the liberty to exploit. Employees could be fired at will and had to accept virtually any working conditions. Unchallenged dominion of employers opened the door to the negligent treatment of workers that fueled the labor union movement. Employers resisted demands for kinder treatment of workers and bitterly fought the rise of unions. And that is where we are today. Anything else on unions? Anything else on labor?
Yeah, let me just do a shameless plug real quick.
Sure.
There were 2 local candidates endorsed by the American Federation of Labor. There was Phil Ayer, who of course is no longer running, and there was my good friend Vicki Garrett in Florida House District 3 going up against Mike Hill. She does have the nomination, so if you like your unions, vote for Vicki Garrett.
That was a shameless plug. And we'll do more election specials later.
Right.
Thank you for watching this longer video. Again, feel free to break it up into segments and share this in all your videos with your friends and family. We need 1,000 subscribers to our YouTube page, the Greg and Donny News Show YouTube channel, so we can stream live and get comments directly. And we also need you to join us all the time, constantly, every day. Go to the Greg and Donny News Show Facebook page, because the stories that we're posting there are the stories that we're discussing at the end of the week on our Saturday
so
shows.
much fun on there too.
We do. We really have a good time. I mean, we get as outrageous as you can. People looking at our Facebook page, they've got to be saying, what does this page mean? You got this conservative story, then this liberal story, and we're all saying back and forth. We're really having too much fun. But I couldn't do it without Donny. Donny is a credit to this show, and I have the utmost respect for him and his views, even when we disagree, which we do, and that is the whole point of doing this show. So thank you, sir, for being a part of this.
Of course.
All right. I can turn the camera off. You can say something nice about me.
All right. Well, I've said from the beginning, I took all the talent from Greg's former radio station. I mean, he is just the best co-host I could possibly have, and we couldn't do the show without him. So, Greg, thank you for everything.
Thank you very much, Donny. And we'll be back next time.